my title of my talk today is about sleep and chronic illness. And I suppose, as I'm going through, I'll probably bring out some specific examples around ME and fatigue. But definitely, I suppose it's kind of thinking about these two challenges, sleep and chronic illness, and they both can affect each other. They're not always good bedfellows, but today hopefully we'll kind of get some strategies for how to make them kind of a bit more harmonious, and to make sleep work for you and as a tool really in managing your illness. Despite the fact that the illness itself can impact the sleep architecture as well. So as we'll find out, it's kind of a dual relationship. There's no easy answers, but certainly I think understanding more about how sleep happens, what should be happening, means we can kind of sometimes go in there then with that bit more knowledge to kind of pull apart the problems and to kind of see if we can kind of get things back on track sometimes. So a little bit about me, first of all. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm over 25 years now working as an OT. I'm based in Galway, but I see probably 90% of my clients online. So I see people all over the country. And primarily with the Brí Clinic, that's the name of my private clinic, I specialise around fatigue and sleep and cognitive problems, among other things. But they would be the three biggest reasons why somebody would be coming to see me. So as you can imagine, within that, I would have a significant enough caseload of people with ME, and also various other energy impairing conditions, such as people with long COVID, perhaps, and POTS and all kinds of sleep issues as well, stroke and various things like that. When I'm not working for myself, I also work for the HSE part-time. So I'm part-time with the HSE, part-time private. And my area there of practice is primarily around stroke. So I've worked in neuro rehab really for most of my career. I'm a member of CORU and a member of our professional body and all of that. And I'm also a member of Long COVID Physio, who are an international organisation of healthcare practitioners. Even though it's called Long COVID Physio, they let the rest of us in as well. So healthcare practitioners who have, by and large, a lived experience of long COVID as well as a healthcare background. So an interesting part. I myself don't have long COVID, but I am an allied member. So today we're going to be talking about sleep. And sleep is of critical importance to our survival as a species. So if you think about kind of some of those pillars of health, we can actually do without food longer than we can do without sleep. It is absolutely one of the absolute must-haves in terms of our health. And yet in all, the exact purpose of sleep is a mystery. So we don't completely know why we sleep as humans on a daily basis versus, say, big bears that go to rest for hibernation over winter or whatever. So we don't know all the nuances of why ours looks like this and why other animals maybe might sleep for 16 hours a day, why some animals might sleep for 4 hours a day. We don't know. There's a lot that we don't know about sleep. But what we do know is that it has multiple functions. So there's definitely more than just one thing happening when you're going to sleep. And I think when we think about sleep, it's not just an on-off switch. It's not my body's going to standby mode or my body's going on rest mode. It's actually working away while you're sleeping. And that's why it's really important that we get enough sleep, because it really affects multiple parts of the body, our brain, skin, liver, immune system. And if we don't get enough sleep, it increases the risk of health problems, additional health problems, such as the risk of diabetes, can impact our weight, can impact our mood, impact various different regulatory kind of things within our system as well, like our blood pressure. And so, it is so important. And yet, if you are on this call because you have ME, one of the characteristics, one of the diagnostic criteria for ME is actually sleep disturbance. So what can happen with ME is that it can throw this sleep, throw it in a bit of haywire, just when you very much need it the most. So who wouldn't want that these positive effects from sleep? Boosting our immune system, boosting our recovery, boosting our energy levels, boosting our brain function. So we can see that it kind of can one can really impact the other. But if we can get sleep working for us and working a little bit better, it can really have a knock-on effect in a really positive way on lots and lots of the other symptoms. So it can have a really positive knock-on effect in terms of, say, for example, pain, our threshold for various activities as well, our fatigue levels, of course, our cognition. So it's worth really trying to maximize it. And that's what I always say to my clients is we're not aiming for perfect. You're aiming for taking it and shaping it. That's the word I use again and again. I'm sure I'll say it lots and lots of times over the next 45 minutes or so. But it's really about shaping. It's not about that there's this idealized kind of thing that is there and is always achievable and is always I spend my lifetime talking about sleep, about fatigue. I love sleepless nights too. I love nights where I can't get back to sleep. I love those challenges as well. So nobody has this gold standard bulletproof kind of sleep pattern either. So we need to mind it, and we need to make it work for us. So the first thing to kind of understand, I think, about sleep is what is happening. We close our eyes and what comes next, because we're not conscious, we're not aware of it. So we need to kind of understand what's really happening. And if you look at the circular diagram there on the left-hand side, this breaks down the sleep cycle into the 4 different component parts. And some people would argue there's 5, but for today, let's think about 4. The 4 different component parts of sleep. We have our dream sleep, which is our REM sleep, which is there in the dark blue. And then we have our light sleep, which is those initial stages of sleep. And then we have our deep sleep, that mid blue there, that really restorative sleep as well. So we can see that a sleep cycle usually, and it changes, in different people, and changes at their different life stages as well. Sarah was talking there about a little baby, and kind of, our sleep changes, as we grow up, as we age, these various different influences that we have. But essentially, you're talking in and around 90 minutes. So our body goes through a full sleep cycle roughly around 90 minutes. It'll vary a little bit over the course of the night. It'll vary a little bit with our lifespan. It'll vary a little bit with regards to what else we've been doing during the day. So we have this mixture of these various different stages. Now, the N1, the yellow, is just that kind of, it's like that first couple of minutes of sleep, when you're just nodding off, you're just going, so where you're technically you are sleeping, but you're really just entering sleep, so if somebody is sleeping through the night, that really only happens, we only get that N1 if somebody's sleeping a full 8 hours, we'll say maybe at the start of the night. But in reality, lots of us cycle through where we're having short periods of this N1 through the night. So maybe you might wake up to go to the loo. Maybe you might wake up, there's a bit of traffic outside. Maybe you might wake up, maybe a partner comes into the bed beside you, whatever. So there might be different reasons why we wake briefly and then go back down again. We're often not even aware that we've gone back into that N1 sleep. N2 then is light sleep. And this might seem that it's it takes up 50% of our sleep time. So it's actually very, very important. But this is where we spend a lot of our time, our bodies resting. So a lot of physical rest and restoration is really happening in this phase. But we're not, our heart rates are beginning to drop, our temperature is beginning to drop. And so we're getting already kind of the beginning of some of these sleep benefits, even in this, what's called light sleep stage. We then enter N3, and that's our deep sleep, our deepest sleep of the night. And that's the bit that's probably the hardest to wake yourself up out of. So if somebody wakes you in the middle of a deep sleep when you're in this stage, you're going to be at your groggiest, you're going to be at your grouchiest probably as well, let's be honest. And you're going to feel that kind of real, kind of stunned almost kind of feeling of being woken up out of a deep sleep. So this is where a lot of the sweet stuff really happens in terms of our sleep. So when we're in this N3, um, our bodies do a lot of its work around our immune system, does a lot of work around repair around the body, muscle repair. We release growth hormone, which helps with all of that repair stuff, helps our kids to grow, helps all of our bones and stuff to renew and repair and replenish. And also, it has a lot of positives around our memory as well. So it has a lot of benefits in terms of our cognition. And it's thought that this is the period where a lot of the waste products are also removed from our brain. So you might think, well, what's happening there? But there's fluid bathing your brain the whole way through the night, the whole way through the day as well, the whole way through the night in particular, very, very active in terms of processing. So the lymphatic system, very, very active during that N3 phase. Now, if you have very interrupted sleep, the challenge is you're not getting into that N3 stage, you're not getting into that deep, deep stage, or you're not spending long enough in that stage as well. So we don't get, while the light sleep is definitely helping, and some of that is occurring, we're not getting long enough and restorative enough time in that N3, which is that really, 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 really critical importance in terms of feeling refreshed, renewed and restored, so that kind of feeling of, that was good. We then move through, in our last phase of our sleep cycle is our REM sleep. So this is where we begin, our bodies actually begin to get a bit more active again. It's called rapid eye movement. So our eye moves are moving up and down. Our brain is actually as active in this phase as it is when we're awake. So when we're dreaming, our brains are on the go, on the go, on the go, even though we're not always conscious of it. Sometimes we do remember our dreams, more often than not, we don't. And so within this phase, a lot of creativity, problem solving, planning, we're making sense of the day's experiences and we're processing and churning it over in kind of a sense making kind of a way. And that's why, you might, dream that a fish finger is talking to you, it's something random is happening to you in the middle of a dream or something like that, that your body's making sense of kind of, what's going on, what are we doing? Really important for memory, and also really, really, really important for our mood as well. So mood can be affected by all of the cycles, but particularly in terms of our REM, because it helps us to process in, I suppose, very often a safe way. So it's a safe way for us to re-experience things that have occurred during the day. Now, that is also, if you can think about where things can go wrong in terms of sleep, we can start to see where different stages can have particular challenges in terms of sleep. So, as I've just mentioned, often we're processing them in a very safe way, but sometimes for people who might get stuck with unpleasant memories, might get stuck in terms of nightmares and very, very vivid, uncomfortable images, perhaps, so that again can be part and parcel of the REM phase of sleep and dreaming. With regards to our deep sleep, we've spoken about the challenges in regards to maintaining that. So comfort, temperature, bladder, and the environment are all really, really important in that stage. And then with regards to our light sleep, our environment becomes even more important because we're easier to wake. So the things that are occurring within our environment, we become more sensitive to them. And then we cycle through these stages at various different points during the night. So when you fall asleep first, and this is not a prescription for what time to fall asleep at, it's just giving you an example. But when you fall asleep, first of all, you can see that the amount of REM, so the amount of dream sleep there at the start, is quite slender relative to how it grows further on in the night. So your body will always prioritize the deep sleep that is much more about physical renewal, that is much more about our immune system, that is much more about I suppose getting the system back up and running, and it will prioritize that sleep earlier in the night, so that we get more of that. And then as the night goes on, we get a little bit less of that and a little bit more of our dream sleep as well. So when we think about people who have an abbreviated sleep, so who are maybe not getting the recommended hours of sleep or not getting a prolonged hour of sleep, we can see that very often it's that REM sleep that gets squished. So they're not getting the same amount of REM sleep as maybe somebody else might be getting. So definitely can affect things like irritability, can affect mood, can affect anxiety, and can also really affect some of the cognitive dysfunction that we often see in ME as well. But I suppose the good news is that the body, takes care of all this when we are asleep. So it automatically knows what to do and what areas to prioritize as well. So what happens in normal sleep is we have a couple of things that need to happen. And this is sometimes where we're troubleshooting as a therapist, where I'm kind of looking with somebody to go, right, well, which of these are not happening, or which of these may or may not be working for you. So first and foremost is a temperature drop. Now, the temperature of our body needs to drop. So to get to sleep, particularly our core temperature needs to drop for sleep to happen. So we can sometimes overheat our bedrooms. And that can sometimes, because we want that lovely cozy feeling. Who doesn't like that? The coziness, the warmth, sometimes even the pressure, can really help regulate us on a sensory level. And so that pressure of the maybe the weighted blanket or the heavier duvet or whatever can be can really soothe us and can help us to enter that sleep state. But what can sometimes happen is that we can overheat kind of quickly. And then, of course, in ME, there's very often a dysregulation around our autonomic functioning. So your body may not kind of get back into that even keel as readily as somebody else. So, for example, you might find sleeping on warmer nights to be particularly challenging. And equally, then some people will find the opposite. So they will find that they are very, very cold, over cold, and find that it's really difficult to kind of get to that just right spot where sleep can occur. So sometimes we're thinking about how we can look at regulating the bedroom temperature. Is it about opening another window? Is it about kind of a gel sheet perhaps under the duvet? Particularly coming in, we haven't had this bother too much over the last couple of months, but we're starting to now come into the season where, this can be increasingly a challenge as well. So are you changing your duvet for a lighter duvet? Or do you have other options around that? And what I sometimes say to people as well is your needs may not, if you're sharing a bed, your needs may not be the same needs as your partner as well. So sometimes having individual duvets or even individual beds, whatever works for you. Sleep is so important that it's well worth looking and seeing what can work for you. Or, for example, if you've pets in the bed, is their heat overheating you? What can you do to kind of regulate that temperature to kind of keep yourself cool, but not so cold that it's actually going to wake you up in its own right as well. A handy hack around that as well for kind of cooling our core, but keeping us warm. So particularly for people who find it hard to get warm, is bed socks and things like that, because what they're on our periphery, so it doesn't really affect our core so much. but can give us that coziness and actually can really help us, particularly to drop off to sleep quicker. So if you do wake in the middle of the night or something like that, sometimes having a pair of cozy bed socks, pop them on you, and seeing does that help just to kind of, it kind of tricks the body into thinking its core is cooler than it actually is, because by relatively heating the feet, our bodies can sometimes feel cooler, even if in the moment they're not actually cooling as quickly as that. But it's kind of a little hack as well. Our breathing will typically slow, so we all know that. And the typical cartoon character of the sleeping villain that the hero tiptoes past, and that kind of, very slow honk shoe, where everybody's just waiting for that breathing to regulate and for that breathing to change as well. So on a very practical level as well, particularly if you suffer from any sorts of allergies or MCAS or things like that, make sure your sinuses are cleared. Make sure you're kind of giving your nose a good blow as well before bedtime, just making sure that your opportunity for breathing and effective breathing is optimized as well. Most people will find their breath is most effective as well in a side lying position. Sometimes when we're lying on our back, we're more prone to snore. And often as well, particularly as we age, or, it can be genetic as well, that our soft palate can kind of fall a little bit back into our throat. That can sometimes cause a condition called sleep apnea, which is a result of kind of where people will wake for really short, like microseconds each time. But if you think about that sleep cycle, constantly waking during that means it prevents us from getting into that deep sleep, really, really restorative phase. And so people with sleep apnea, even though they might have been in bed thinking they're sleeping for hours and hours on end, they may not be getting the quality sleep, in particular, getting that deep quality sleep, which is the very late stage non-REM sleep, and then the REM sleep as well. So it is a risk factor for increasing your blood pressure as well. So definitely one to be aware of. And for some people, all you need to do is turn on your side. For other people, then they may need specific investigations and specific support around that, such as CPAP would be, BiPAP, those sorts of kind of sleep devices to kind of make sure that there is a continual open airway there for us to breathe. Now, the next one is our heart rate needs to slow. So essentially, our heart rate needs to dip below about 60 to sleep. If you are afflicted with the likes of POTS, or again, where you're maybe not quite reaching the threshold for POTS, which is a tachycardia syndrome, very commonly co-occurring with ME, it can be really, really hard to get the heart rate down to a level where the sleep can kick in. So we'll be talking in a little while about relaxation, about transition activities and things like that. But basically, that's our goal as well, is to try to really regulate our breathing, and our heart rate will often work in tandem with each other as well. So again, can we try to get that regulated, get it slowed, get us into that stage where we can just tip over into sleep? Because there's nothing worse than being exhausted, being super, super tired and sleepy, but not able to get that sleep onset. And often that can be partially due to the heart rate as well. So finding what works for you in terms of getting that heart rate down to a level. And typically, it's very hard to sleep with your heart racing, so, managing your positioning and managing your fluids, any medications that you might be on, but then also your breathing strategies, your whatever relaxes you and becomes a transition activity. And we'll be talking about that in a few moments anyway. Our movement slows or stops as well, so we might slow or stop our movements. Not everybody fully stops moving, until they're asleep in that N3 stage. So, it's fine if you're not fully, or if you like kind of cuddling in, or you like kind of twitching your toes together, or whatever gives you that sense of kind of comfort, and that sense of kind of sensory regulation, as well. So whatever you're comfortable with. But obviously, as we're sleeping, our movement will generally slow or stop, unless we have one of the sleep disorders that causes us to continue to move around. Our eye movement will vary with that sleep stage. And our brain activity varies, as I was saying, with the sleep stages as well. So going from very, very active in REM right through to housekeeping only, almost in that N3 stage. And then our metabolism is still ongoing. So actually, we need energy to sleep. We think of sleep as restoring our energy, and absolutely, it has a very valuable role in that. But we also need enough sleep we also need enough energy to get to sleep and to actually sustain us through the night as well. So for some people, there may be challenges there in terms of blood sugar, in terms of kind of keeping a nice even amount of energy going through to the body as well. So we use, it's not a huge amount, but we do need around, of our calories, we're sort of about 20% of our calories, even just to cover our sleep, so most of our energy is used during the day, but we still are using energy as we sleep. And even I worked in an ICU back years ago, even people who are in a coma for several days have energy requirements as well. So if you think all of that housekeeping doesn't come for free, so our liver is working away, our brain is working away, our muscles are using energy to replenish, and so on and so forth as well. So don't go to bed ravenously hungry either, making sure that you have just a little bit, and sometimes particularly a protein rich snack can be helpful, and it can help us sometimes to go to sleep. That kind of milky drink and that kind of soothingness of the milky drink can be just enough sometimes to get us to sleep, and then also gives us a little bit of something to sustain us as well. So I'm going to think about some tips then for getting your best sleep. So if you think about maybe for yourself now, you might think, well, what is my problem? Do I have a problem? Maybe I don't have a problem. Maybe sleep is not regularly an issue for me. But what is my problem? And then matching the strategy to that. So for some people, it might be getting to sleep. So you might really be like, oh gosh, yeah, when you're talking now about the heart rate and getting into that sleep and being able to kind of just at that early phase of the night, being able to switch into sleep, that might be the piece that really, really resonates with you. For another person, it might be lots and lots of waking through the night. So where that cycle is completed and you're waking every single time, and maybe having that difficulty getting back to sleep. So maybe you go off to sleep fine at 11, but come 3 o'clock, you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So we need to think about what the problem is. Or maybe actually you're like, well, I think I'm sleeping, but maybe I'm snoring. Maybe I might need to kind of get, have a look and see, do I need to get a sleep study done? Could there be something going on as well in terms of my breathing or in terms of those sorts of things? So what really the purpose of that is because you match your strategy to your problem. So my pet hate is one of these newspaper articles. Now I'm going to give you some strategies around sleep hygiene, so I'm kind of counteracting my own advice here. But I absolutely am allergic to these articles that go 20 ways to improve your sleep, because they're not matched to the problem that somebody's having. So actually thinking about, it doesn't matter how expensive the lavender spray is that you're spraying on your pillow. If your problem is, well, I wake with the lark at 5:30 and I cannot get back to sleep, it's not the lavender at 10 o'clock that's going to keep you asleep. It's actually having, in that case, probably a really good look at your environment, having a really good look at your temperature, having a really good look at perhaps your heart rate, and kind of as that those early morning hormones kick in, is it getting it giddied up again? So thinking about changing one or two things, rather than thinking I have to have a list of 25 different things for my sleep hygiene for sleep to occur. If you're not sleeping, You're not sleeping because you didn't complete the whole 20 list in the Irish Independent. So don't be worrying about that first and foremost. Pick one or two things that actually match the problem you're having, or if you're overheating, or if you're finding my sleep schedule is haywire. We didn't really talk so much about that. But it could be your circadian rhythm, that you're sleeping at various different points in the day, that could be the issue. And rather than, oh, I haven't sprayed enough lavender spray or something like that. Now, no harm to anybody who is spraying their lavender spray if you like it, because sleep loves habit and repetition. So we love those rituals, whatever it is, but it's what's relevant to you. So you gradually begin to shape your sleep in a different way. So what we're doing is we're taking one or two things that have meaning for you. And actually, what might get you really relaxed might be something completely different to somebody else. So we'll come back to that. But one of the first things that I want to kind of tell you about around these sleep strategies is around light, because this is one that is absolutely scientific, evidence-based. So light is really, really regulating on our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is the day-to-day rhythm within our body, and it regulates a whole load of different things: our blood sugar, our blood pressure, our sleep, releases different hormones, different points. And so we have this kind of internal body clock, if you like, that's kind of helping us to do the various different functions that our bodies need to do. But light in particular has a huge impact on our circadian rhythm, and it tells the body when to wake and sleep. So what tells the body to sleep are two things that need to kind of coincide. So we have our circadian rhythm where, we can kind of try to fall asleep at certain points in the day. You might think, oh, I've got to get up early for a trip or a hospital appointment or a flight or whatever. And you try to go to bed 2 hours before your normal bedtime. And you can't do it because it's almost impossible to try to fall asleep sometimes at that time. Or you might fall asleep, but you'll wake up again. It won't be that long, durable sleep that we are looking for to replenish us overnight. So our circadian rhythm gets very accustomed to us sleeping and waking at certain points in the day. So sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking. And what tells us about sleeping and waking very often is light. So what's one of the most useful things if you are trying to get more sleep is to try to get light in the morning. So around 16 hours before your bedtime is when you will kind of really think about getting that sleep, and it then will kind of get used to that rhythm, and then begin to release our melatonin in readiness for that sleep 16 hours later. So light is one of the most regulating things we can do for our circadian rhythm. Now, light sensitivity can be a big factor in ME. So, you do need to balance it. And of course, we don't want anybody to, to increase beyond a threshold that is comfortable for them and that is tolerable for them as well. So your individual point in this, will be different relative to others. But if you can, when you wake in the morning, get some sort of light increase or some sort of light change, be that a light box, be that sitting beside a bright window, be it even just opening up the blinds, to try and get that brain going. It's morning and I need to then kind of regulate myself around this. So actually that light really regularly in the morning is a great one. Daylight is the best light you can get in terms of the lux and in terms of the strength of that light. And as I say, outside is best, but it's really not always possible, so you have to kind of take this and take this information and kind of make it your own, so kind of thinking, well, maybe I could kind of make sure I have my breakfast in a brighter part of the house, or maybe I can do some tweak around my blinds, or around a light box, or around whatever it is. Our sleep environment then is another thing. So we have that temperature regulation that we mentioned. Comfort and positioning is also really a challenge often to get right, because sometimes pain can be a common challenge, as well as fatigue. So we do need to kind of think about what's good, and then thinking about particularly people who are in bed for much longer periods of time, actually having perhaps a variety of positioning aids, so that you're like, any one position can be really challenging. So kind of thinking about whether a bolster, whether tea rolls, whether pillows, whether hospital bed, and it can be just about getting that sweet spot and trying different things as well. Are there different mattresses, the gel overlay ones, which might help with being cool, or the air overlay ones, versus kind of those memory foam ones, which tend to kind of increase heat? Which kind of sleeper am I? What's good for me? So kind of really thinking about those various different challenges as well. And particularly if you're staying in bed for longer periods during the day, which many people with ME would be doing, think about, is there a way to differentiate night from day? And this might be around the light. It might be that during the day I sleep on top of the bedclothes with maybe a blanket over me, or I rest on top of the bed with maybe a blanket over me. Whereas at nighttime, then I pull the duvet over, and that kind of feels like sleep. So trying to think about, how do I make it, or maybe it's when it's sleep time, I turn on the white noise. When it's daytime, I don't, so thinking about, is there a way that you can differentiate those different elements of your day? Or, so for some people, it could be the rhythm of, you don't want to expend your very, very valuable energy unnecessarily, but it might be around, well, I'll change my pajama top for a t-shirt, or that sort of thing, so that you're kind of thinking, you're teaching almost your circadian rhythm. It's daytime now and it's nighttime then, so thinking about that, and trying to get the right payoff in terms of the potentially improved sleep for the energy expenditure. So, that's something that can take some figuring out to get right. Separate beds or separate coverings, is also really good for bed partners. So some people don't want to have a separate bed, perhaps, if they have a partner. Some people do, and find that they get much better sleep on their own. But an option, an in-between option, can sometimes be separate coverings, so that if you're trying to regulate your temperature in the middle of the night, that you can kind of do that without kind of disturbing a partner, or without kind of feeling bad about it, really, I suppose. Equally, if you're trying to manage nighttime wakings with various different strategies, a lot of people find being on their own room to be easier to manage, because they can turn on the light, they can do a bit of reading, they can sit out, they can manage those kind of times in a different way. So, but very much each to their own in terms of that, but just something that can be worth considering. And then sleep and wake times, we need 7 to 9 hours typically. Now I've put down here post-exertional malaise as well, because when our immune system is very, very, very active, and so, for example, if you have a significant infection, or if you have quite an immune post-exertional malaise, so if you get a lot of kind of, sore throat symptoms, those really flu-y kind of feelings, aches and pains, a lot of people would find that their need for sleep is much greater during post-exertional malaise as well. So, so this 7 to 9 hours, it's a framework, it's a guideline, but mileage may vary. So, different people will have different requirements along that as well. On a given day, you might function okay on 5 to 6 hours as well. So this is kind of more over time that you do need this. But definitely, if you're routinely only getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, the evidence would suggest that that does have long-term health impacts. And so you may need to supplement that with additional sleep during the day, for example, with napping. And I don't have time to go into all of the napping information or things like that, but I do have a blog on my website if anybody's thinking about that as well. Essentially, with napping, we don't want to take our naps so late that it's going to disrupt our nighttime sleep. But some people may need, and I would suggest in that situation where somebody's routinely only getting a few hours of sleep at nighttime for various reasons, perhaps like a late morning additional 90-minute cycle, giving yourself a full cycle, might be what you do to supplement that some days or days that you can. Whereas if you imagine if you have that at 4:30 up until 6, that may then affect your sleep onset later in the evening, because the brain chemical adenosine, which is the sleep pressure chemical, the chemical that makes us feel sleepy and ready to sleep, may not have had enough time to build back up again. So anyway, if you want to know more about naps, have a look online. But essentially, that we do need, by and large, on a maybe not on an every single day basis, but on a routine basis, we want to be trying to get at least those 7 hours. If you're making changes, so we spoke about typically in ME, what can often happen is that the sleep, that your circadian rhythm, a lot of people will get a shifted kind of later sleep cycle. So a lot of people with ME would report having difficulty. They might fall asleep 1:30, and then they're rising much later in the morning as well. So say, for example, you wanted to shift that back. If you all of a sudden decide, oh, well, I'm going to sleep at 11 and go to wake myself up at 8, that might be maybe where you want to get to. If you decided that, no reason to decide it unless your environment demands it. But if your environment did demand it or you did need it, then you would shape that in 15 to 30-minute increments. You don't do the whole lot in a oneer, because you give yourself literally jet lag and everything that goes with that. And that in itself can then increase post-exertion malaise as well. So when you're shaping, you shape slowly, 15 to 30 minutes increments. So say you were falling asleep 1 to half 8 and you're 1 to half 1 or something like that, and you want to bring it earlier, maybe to coincide with family rhythms, or maybe you're starting a new course of medication that you need to have at a certain point of the day, or work issues, or whatever the story is. You shape it very, very gradually. But as I say, not everybody needs to shape it. And I would say sometimes if you're getting good sleep, who cares if it's from 2 o'clock till 9:30? Do you know what I mean? Who says it has to be, like that first slide said, 10:30 to whatever. So, do listen to your body on it as well. And sometimes that later shift can occur and can be just something that people tend to function better on, so there aren't always prescriptions in this sort of thing. It is influenced by your day-to-day demands. Consider the impact of naps and other rest, as we mentioned. And then I've just put medications in here. So I'm not a prescriber. I'm not going to go into those different types of medications and things like that. But sometimes a lot of medications are prescribed assuming somebody is sleeping between 11 and 7. So they might say, oh, take this at such and such time, meaning take it when you get up, rather than actually that it has to be at 7 a.m. So understand what medications you're on, understand what they're about. So for example, some of the medications around POTS, for example, they're designed to kind of increase your blood pressure and to kind of give you that increase so that you're getting up. Now, if you're taking them at 7 and then going back to sleep until 10, that's not necessarily going to benefit you. What you should be doing is taking them at 10 o'clock. So think about your routine and continue those conversations with your pharmacy, with your GP. Understand any medications you're on, and also then there can be ones as well that can influence sleep in a different way. So like can some of your sleeping medications or your sleeping supplements, which can particularly impact sleep onset. maybe making you more sleepy through the day, things like antihistamines, but also medications that can work for you by taking them at a different point in the day. Caffeine has a long half-life and can influence sleep for a considerable amount of time. So I think we kind of know that all right. It's pretty well known that some people with ME can't tolerate caffeine at all, but certainly to consider decaf options or herbal teas or other fluids, for the second half of the day in particular. And then say the difference in caffeine content in different drinks can also influence. So, for example, if you're somebody who drinks a lot of, say, matcha, green teas, or that sort of thing, there is caffeine in it, but it releases slower than, say, the coffee, which will give you that big shot of energy, which is maybe more short-lived, but can be definitely still in your system regardless, that bit later. So just a few points towards the end now is just around the transition activities that I mentioned. So we need to get, so those physical changes that need to occur within our body, we need to get our body ready for sleep. So it's not a switch we can turn on and turn off, as anybody who's experienced sleepless nights will know all too well. But one of the things that is really helpful, particularly for people who have those kind of challenges around their autonomic system, is calming rituals. Now, I would, go through often with a lot of clients, different breathing strategies, maybe different relaxation strategies, maybe different meditation, various things like that. But I just want to say it doesn't have to be something like that. It can be just bubblegum TV. Do you like watching Westerns that you've seen 10 times before? Does that send you off to the land of Nod? Mighty. Do that. If you like kind of maybe just kind of taking your time, doing your skincare, maybe putting on your hand cream, doing that, and that's your transition activity, mighty, do that. So it doesn't have to be something, again, no more than the list in the Irish Independent. It doesn't have to be the latest trend in yoga or the latest trend in whatever breathing activity. Those things are helpful, absolutely. But really, the purpose is to calm the physiologies, to calm the mind, to calm the body, and to really help us kind of settle in terms of that movement coming down, the breath coming down, the heart rate coming down, and then just the readiness to fall into sleep. So it can be whatever, whatever gets you into that state. It might be kind of petting your dog, whatever gets you into that calm transition state, because we very often need some sort of a transition from day to night. We can't just turn it on. Now, the final thing here are just different types of rest. And I won't go through this today, but I know you'll probably be sending out the slides, Declan. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that there are other forms of rest as well. We often think about rest as our sleep and our naps. And that's the title of the talk. That's what we're here today to talk about, right? But there is also active rest as well. And these are other types of restorative activities where you're not actually asleep, where your level of consciousness is not affected. And so living with chronic illness is so, so important that not only do we try to get our sleep, our napping, all of that passive rest right, but that we also think about our active rest as well. And these are just active rest. It's not necessarily that you're doing a whole load of anything, but it's more that you're resting, but you're still alert. So think of it more in that way. So it's awake rest rather than sleeping rest. Because obviously you need to manage your energy and your energy output, and that is, obviously very often limited. But I just wanted to kind of just highlight that point. And I think, a lot of kind of the deep rest, alert deep breaths, like your yoga nidras and your various different things like this, or even if you're kind of lying awake at night in the middle of the night, that if you can kind of get yourself into a calm, restful state, even if you're not asleep, it counts for about a third. So it's not wasted time. I think, sometimes it's like, oh my God, and then the thoughts spiral and you go, Jesus, I have to get up to 9:30 now tomorrow. I'm going to be like going to be just and it's already such and such a time, and I haven't had enough sleep. I only got to bed at 2. Oh gosh, I'm going to be wrecked. And we sometimes can catastrophize and kind of get ourselves into more of a knot around that. Whereas sometimes if we can kind of stop ourselves and actually go, well, look, I'm here. I'm going to at least rest my body. I'm going to accept where I'm at. My body is rested. I'm safe. I'm going to calm, and actually going into something like a just a bit of a calmer space, a little bit more of an accepting space. Number one, sleep is more likely to come back on you. And number two, your body is still getting rest, so you are still being rested. Not as good as sleep, but nonetheless, it's still there. So there are various different types of rest, and I'm just going to include them here just more for the slides than anything else, and for anybody who just kind of wants to think about it. But, thinking about our sensory rest, turning down the volume in the world, can we kind of find a space that we're just getting that sweet spot, for example, in terms of our sensations, our sound, our light, our pressure, our bodies, creative rest, emotional rest, so important, social rest, spiritual, and then what your rest prescription is. So as I say, I'm not going to go through them all, but these headings are from Sandra Dalton Smith, who has a lovely book all about the different types of rest as well. So I just included it there for a little bit of variety as well, and to say that if you can't get sleep, and nobody can, just to kind of stay in that restful space, and you're still getting some of those restorative benefits.